Right, let's get straight to it. There's quite a significant discussion happening in Britain right now.
Mm-hmm.
The government's appointed Hamed Patel. He's a pretty prominent Islamic figure to a key role in education, overseeing curriculum, standards, the whole lot.
And it's really kicked off a lot of debate, hasn't it?
It really has. Some people are worried, that it signals maybe an increasing influence of Islamic teachings in schools.
Exactly.
So if you're trying to sort of get a handle on what's going on without getting completely bogged down, well, that's what we're digging into here, trying to pull out the key bits.
And what's immediately striking is just how strong the reaction has been. You've got these social media campaigns, politicians, media figures involved,
Right.
really sort of amplifying fears about what they're calling a growing push for Islam within British education.
And the specific worry is?
The main claim seems to be that this appointment, Patel's appointment, could lead to making Islamic studies, like a mandatory core subject.
In primary and secondary school.
Yeah, exactly. And the fear expressed is that it might even, push aside other religious education, like Christianity or Hinduism.
Okay, so let's talk about Hamed Patel himself. He's the person right at the center of this.
Mm-hmm.
He's now the head of Ofsted. That's the body, the main inspectorate for schools in the UK.
Right, the ones who evaluate and monitor. And it's worth noting some outlets, particularly British and French ones, have actually used the term Islamist to describe him.
Which is quite a loaded term.
It is. So a bit of background on Patel might help here.
Right.
Before this, he was the CEO of Star Academies.
Okay, Star Academies. They run quite a few schools.
They do. Nearly 40 primary and secondary schools.
Yeah.
Mostly Islamic, yes. But interestingly, they also run some Christian schools.
Oh, okay.
And, a really key point is that many of his institutions, under his leadership, they received excellent ratings from Ofsted itself.
Right, the very body he now leads.
Precisely. And he was knighted back in 2021, Sir Hamed Patel, for services to education. He's also been on Ofsted's board since 2019, and before Star Academies, he headed Tawhid-ul-Islam Girls High School in Blackburn.
Okay, and that school, Tawhid-ul-Islam, that's where some specific concerns have originated, right? Practices from his time there.
That's what's being brought up, yes. Things like reports of encouraging students to wear the hijab outside of school hours, recommending weekly Quran recitations, and even suggestions about avoiding non-Islamic imagery on things like stationery.
I see. So those past practices are being used now to sort of fuel current worries about his new role.
It seems that way. And this leads directly to the concerns voiced publicly. You had, for instance, a spokesperson for an anti-Semitism campaign expressing unease about someone labeled an Islamist overseeing school evaluations.
Right.
And the National Secular Society also weighed in. They urged Patel to make sure Ofsted doesn't let religion, get in the way of educational standards or kids' rights to an inclusive education.
So balancing religious freedom with secular education needs.
That's the tension, yeah. But like you said earlier, there's another side to this narrative.
Okay.
Well, some sources point out that Patel was actually seen as quite a balanced member when he was just on the Ofsted board.
Okay.
And apparently he didn't oppose bringing in stricter regulations for some of the more, let's say, hardline religious schools.
Interesting. And hasn't the UK's Chief Inspector of Schools commented, Martin Oliver?
He has. Oliver stated pretty clearly that Patel runs some of England's best schools, that he's highly respected, and again mentioned the knighthood as recognition of his significant contribution.
So, quite a different picture there. What about internationally? You mentioned French media.
Yes, the international perspective, especially from France, is quite pointed. Le Journal du Dimanche, a French paper, suggested that, despite London saying it fights extremism, this appointment puts a key educational pillar into the hands of someone serving, quote, an organized Islamic project.
Wow, okay. Strong words.
Very. And a French MEP, François-Xavier Bellamy, took it even further. He claimed it's part of a bigger Islamic strategy to control institutions, starting with schools, and basically warned Europe to wake up.
And there was a French writer, too.
Daniel Cusson. He framed it as part of a contemporary Islamic awakening and a strategy of conquest through the Islamization of knowledge. He argued schools are becoming centers for a proselytizing movement aiming for a global caliphate.
Okay, so some really intense views coming from France. Let's get back to that core claim, though. Is Islamic teaching actually becoming mandatory in British schools?
Right. The big question. Well, Reuters and Euronews investigated this. Spokespeople for the education departments in England, Wales, and Scotland all said, no, it's not mandatory nationally. Northern Ireland didn't respond, apparently.
But there are nuances, right, especially in England.
Definitely. England does mandate religious education, RE, but the guidance says it should primarily reflect Britain's Christian traditions, while also considering other main religions present in the UK.
And academies have more freedom.
Exactly. Academies have more leeway with their curriculum. Wales also has mandatory RE, but doesn't prioritize Islam specifically. Scotland, no mandatory curriculum at all.
And didn't a House of Lords report touch on this recently?
It did, earlier this year. Confirmed RE is compulsory in state-funded English schools, but how it's taught varies a lot, particularly in faith schools. Another report mentioned Christianity and Islam are, in fact, the most commonly taught religions.
So the idea of forcing Islam on all kids seems unfounded based on current rules, though it's certainly taught.
That seems to be the factual position, yes, which leads many analysts to suggest this whole campaign is, well, linked to rising Islamophobia.
The broader contest of anti-Muslim sentiment.
Precisely. They argue it's being driven by media figures and politicians already known for holding those kinds of views.
Can you give an example of that kind of rhetoric?
Sure. There was an article by Giulio Miotti, pretty provocative stuff, asking if England is heading towards becoming an Islamic state with nuclear weapons. Yeah. He presented Patel's appointment as, like, the result of appeasing political Islam and the Muslim Brotherhood, even referencing concerns raised by the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
Okay, that's definitely painting a stark picture.
And it ties into these broader anxieties about societal shifts that people like Miotti point to.
Like what sort of things?
Well, mentions of increasing numbers of Sharia councils, London as a hub for Islamic finance, prayers being held in Westminster, and predictions based on population growth. The 2021 census showed Muslims at 6.5% of the population, up from 4.9% in 2011, and crucially, a much younger demographic profile, 84.5% under 50.
Yeah.
This is sometimes framed, suggesting Muslims might outnumber nominal Christians within decades.
Right, connecting demographic shifts to these kinds of fears.
Exactly.
Okay, so bringing this all together then. We have a significant appointment, a prominent Muslim leader in a top education job. And it's clearly ignited this really intense debate. It touches on curriculum, religious freedom, but also these deeper currents of, well, alleged Islamophobia and anxieties about change in Britain. It's a complex mix.
It really is. Religious, political, social factors all tangled up.
Which leaves us, and you listening, with something to think about.
Considering all these different viewpoints, the concerns, the counterarguments, and the actual facts about religious education in the UK, what does it genuinely mean for a society like Britain to balance its own traditions with, its changing population and diverse beliefs?
That's the core challenge, isn't it? And what could be the long-term effects of these debates? On education itself, obviously, but also on just social cohesion, how people get along.
Yeah, big questions with no easy answers. Definitely something to mull over.